problems of the world are complex. We're faced with climate change, with financial crisis, with conflict and war. Our world is really in bad shape. We see signs of destabilization everywhere, and this creates existential threats. The understanding of our complex world lags behind. And even though we have thousands, if not tens of thousands of regulations, we haven't managed to solve these issues. Neither politics nor companies have managed this. In fact, we rather face many obstacles in our way. If we have good ideas, we often feel we cannot do what needs to be done. And at the same time, we see that industrialized countries all over the world are actually faced with a huge public debt. So will we be able to pay for this system much longer? It's really unlikely, to be honest. And so we need a step change. Could the digital revolution provide this step change that we need? Well, the digital revolution has the potential to change most of our traditional institutions. The way we go shopping, we do that online, the way we do research, talking about big data analytics, the way we educate, like MOOCs or personalized education, also serious interactive games, the way we move, we're talking about self-driving cars, the way we transport goods, talking about drones, the way we produce, think of 3D printers, our health system, think of personalized medicine. And most likely politics will change too, and the economy as well. Financial business has been transformed. Most financial transactions have traditionally been executed by banks. Now we have algorithmic trading. 70% of all trades actually are done by computers. PayPal, Bitcoins, Google Wallet, you name it. And a lot of insurance businesses now happen at the financial markets. Credit default swaps. Even wars are being transformed. So we need now to worry about cyber wars and about weapons, digital weapons, that could strike within tens of seconds and actually hit large areas, critical infrastructures. But the biggest challenge maybe is unemployment. Because now we're seeing another industrial revolution. We all started off basically with agriculture. Most people have been working in this sector. And then eventually the steam engine was invented, and that has created an industrial sector. In the beginning it created a lot of mess because there were not enough jobs for people. The service sector in green was coming up too, and now a fourth sector, the digital economy, is coming up. The sector of information and knowledge production. Well, again, this will create disruption, and we'll be challenged to smooth this disruption as much as possible. In fact, people believe that within the next 10-20 years, 50% of jobs in the traditional sectors will be lost. And if we count this, then it means about 3 to 5% of people in the agricultural sector, about 7.5 to 10% in the industrial sector, about 30 or 25% in the service sector, that would altogether be less than 50% in those traditional areas. So 50% of jobs will have to be created in the digital sector. And the question is, how can we actually do this? Because now everything is more and more automated. Routines can be done by computers and algorithms, and we're entering a time that some people describe as the end of work. In fact, many of the jobs we're doing today are threatened by this digital revolution. Unfortunately, this includes even even highly skilled jobs. Lawyers, professors, doctors. I'm sorry to say this, but we have to rethink ourselves. In fact, in some countries we already have more than 50% unemployment among young people. And I read that the situation in Japan is not much better. So we're in the middle of this transformation. Maybe we haven't understood what's happening, what's going on right now. It's the digital revolution, and a new society is born. And that challenges companies too, not only workers. 30% of today's top 500 companies will be gone in 10 years. Kodak was the leading digital camera company, but they couldn't transform quickly enough, so it's gone. And there are new principles of the economy 4.0 that's now born, in fact. Automation, of course, Industry 4.0, that means communication between machines, between people and machines, always. Smart grids, decentralized control, network thinking, and you read a lot about the sharing economy too. That's part of the network thinking effect. It's a particular kind of recycling invented because of the economic crisis. People are trying to keep up living standards but don't have so much money, so they have to share. But in future we will have to share even more because there will be more people on this planet. And material resources are limited. Which means that we'll keep each of these resources for shorter and shorter times. Why should our car wait in the garage most of the time? Why should we have a drilling machine by ourselves if we just use it one at a time, 2 times a year? So we will circulate these resources basically in order to create higher living standards with less resources for more people. Co-creation will become more and more important. That's again network thinking, networked working. And that applies in particular to the information and knowledge production sector. As machines are doing more and more of our work, of course, of automation, we'll have to do more creative work, have to be more innovative, more special. We'll have to come up with more personalized products. That means we will produce smaller series of products. Economies of scale will not be so important anymore as we're heading towards a zero marginal cost society, where it doesn't make so much difference anymore using 3D printers, for example, whether we produce 1 copy, 1,000 copies, or 1,000,000 copies. Well, we will be able to establish own businesses much more easily, but most likely we'll have to do this. We're heading towards an economy that's more and more short-lived. Like in the past, we had one job for our entire life. Now many people are changing jobs many times during their lifetime. They're even changing the economic sector, the kind of work they're doing. They're doing work for hire, or they're working for Amazon Mechanical Turk, where they pick up jobs for just a few minutes to earn $1. That might be the future of work. How can we solve the challenges of our complex world? I've been raised at a time when most people believed that traffic jams are unavoidable. That crowd disasters are God-given or caused by panic or aggressive behavior. That stock markets crash due to black swans. That multinational companies could control and fix the world. But remember, in 10 years, many of them are gone. That social order is created by power. And all of this is gone. So we need to understand complex dynamical systems much better. Now to get an idea how complex dynamical systems work, think of our body. We know more medicine is not necessarily good. It might be poisonous, in fact. So we don't need more power, we need more wisdom, in fact, in order to cure the ills of our society and economy. In many cases, minimally invasive measures would be much more effective than just applying a lot of power. Take this example, phantom traffic jam. No, it's not difficult to drive in a circle, you think. But in a few seconds, we will see that actually this fluid flow will break down. We'll see a traffic jam, although there's no accident or other reason causing this. So now you see the mess over here, and that could take forever. Now the question is, why is this happening? We'd ask people, they would probably say, there was a stupid driver in front of me, you know? And the secret services would think, okay, we have to find out about this bad guy. And I would try to look into our brains, you know, and basically detect all what we're thinking and feeling, and just suppose they would know all this. Could they predict the occurrence of this phantom traffic jam? No, even if they knew every single thought of us, they couldn't predict it. And why can I be so sure? Because there's a mathematical theory for phantom traffic jams. And this mathematical theory tells us that all it matters is the density of the traffic flow. If this is too high, then a small variation of speeds will be amplified. The next driver will have to respond. He will do that with a delay. To compensate for the delay, he will have to tip the brake a little bit harder. And that creates actually an amplification effect. Second, next one has to do this too. So there is a cascade effect, a domino kind of effect in the end. Something happens that nobody wanted, which is standing still in the traffic jam. Who is guilty of this? Nobody? Everybody? Hard to say, really. Well, the problem is that if we were operating the system at too high densities, we shouldn't have done this. This is an example for the kind of problems that we haven't solved. The big unsolved problems of the world result from systemic instabilities. And these are the kind of problems where even if you have the best technology, a lot of data, good education, and the very best intentions of everyone, things would go wrong sooner or later. And this is actually what's happening. So unstable supply chains are an example. Economic instabilities, recessions, or crowd disasters. Nobody really wants to kill other people in such a situation. But dozens of people are killed in crowd disasters. Not even hundreds of or thousands of security forces could prevent this from happening if the density is too high, if there are too many people. Same thing with crime. There is also an unstable social dynamics, or with so-called social dilemma situations where cooperation would be good for everyone, but it's unstable, like the fluid traffic flow. And that's why cooperation breaks down. We end up in a tragedy of the commons, such as overfishing, or global warming, environmental exploitation or destruction, and all these kind of things. Again, the reason is the systemic instability. Conflicts are results of social instabilities too, and revolutions too. And so what is the mechanism that makes these systems so uncontrollable? Well, it's cascade effects. mess up the entire system. If we have a critical mass, and the same thing happens during financial crisis actually. These are the bankruptcies of banks during the financial crisis, and you see hundreds of banks are dying here, causes losses of hundreds of billions of dollars, you know. This really shouldn't happen. We shouldn't build systems that behave this way. And so how to respond to all these problems? Well, traditionally, we had what I call governance 0.0. Decision-making based on anecdotal evidence. That has changed, or is changing, by big data. Within just 1 minute, actually, 700,000 search queries are actually started on Google. 500,000 comments are posted on Facebook. So what can we do with all this data? Well, we can do evidence-based decision-making using big data analytics. I call this governance 1.0. We can craft instruments to explore the world. We can, for example, study the spreading of international attention and understand it. We can study epidemic spreading. We can also study the spreading of nice things such as knowledge or even ideas or culture. All of this can now be studied in ways that haven't been possible before. What else could we do? Well, Chris Anderson suggested that we would see the end of theory. As we have more and more data, quantity of data would turn into quality, and that would make basically the scientific method obsolete. So the question is, can we know everything? Would so much information enable us to act like a wise king? You know, take the perfect decision for the entire world, just optimize the state of the world with a giant supercomputer.
Just a small question. Has Chris Anderson written this before the financial crisis?
This was written
2008.
I am not sure about this. So unfortunately, big data is not the universal tool to understand and govern the world. Big data often does not actually reveal the causes. If we measure all the bullets shot in a war, we wouldn't understand why the war broke out in the first place. And I haven't seen that people have derived the laws of nature actually from all the experimental data that physics has produced. In fact, pattern recognition is more difficult than one would think. We should see an infinity sign over here, but if we have a little bit of noise in our measurement, then it's really difficult to detect this infinity sign. In many cases, we would see spurious correlations. Like if you look into the sky, some people seem to see patterns. But in fact, from a scientific point of view, they usually don't have a meaning. As this graph doesn't have really a causal meaning. If the number of serial killers would really depend on chocolate consumption, then we would be living very dangerous in Switzerland. Another issue is classification errors. Because usually we want to separate good from bad risks, terrorists from normal people, healthy people from those that would be in hospital many times, and so on. But usually what we find is such an overlay of two data clouds. And so would have false positives and false negatives. Some people would be lucky, some people would be unlucky. And that would create also a lot of discrimination. Probably much more discrimination than we see today. So, we need to be careful about how we use big data. No doubt, there is a lot of power, we can do a lot of good things with it. But we'd like to have something even better than this. And this brings us to governance 2.0, evidence-based decision-making based on artificial intelligence. And here we go towards deep learning. People are now discussing about superintelligence. We know there is this two-brain project or human brain project in Lausanne that wants to rebuild a human brain in silicium. And many companies are now working on AI. In China, there's a China Brain project that's run by the Chinese Google company, Baidu. And they've just invited the military to engage substantially and financially in this project. Google is working on artificial intelligence too, and probably 20 or 50 or maybe hundreds of Silicon Valley companies. So it seems that these systems and cognitive computing is already better in answering questions. And one of the questions is, can we even build a crystal ball with all these data? And if you think this is fantastic, this idea that we could see what's happening in any place of the world right now, immediately, in real time, or even predict what will happen in the future. If you think this is fantastic, then, read this. The military is already working on this. And most likely this is happening in many countries, actually. So the question is, would superintelligent machines, more intelligent than human beings, be feasible? And that brings us to this graph of Wayne-Kurzweil, which basically suggests that in about 10 years' time, computers will reach brain power. Some people say it will take 25 years. That's still really challenging to humans, We won't be the crown of creation anymore. Some people say this will happen in 5 years' time. And maybe it's already there. So in the beginning, intelligent machines will be our tools. And as they get smarter, they will be like our partners at work, and our coaches that tell us, how we should do things, and then eventually our bosses. And if you think this is fantastic, then read this. MIT is already studying these scenarios. So soon we may need upgrades to be competitive. And there are some people who say maybe we need brain implants. If you think this is fantastic, then again, this is being tested already. Neil Harbison is already a cyborg, a human enhanced with technology. And there are probably many of them. But there's one further step, which is basically genetic editing. Would we need bigger brains to compete in the future? And if you saw that finally is fantastic, then you should read newspapers recently that now we have an editing of the human genome. So this is also going to happen very soon. Recently there have been quite some alarming voices like those of Elon Musk and others. Elon Musk, the tech genius of the Silicon Valley, running Tesla, and actually other projects like Hyperloop, Mars mission, and all these kind of things. And he says, I think we should be very careful about artificial intelligence. If I had to guess what our biggest existential threat is, it's probably artificial intelligence. Now, when I was reading about artificial intelligence as a possible threat to humanity, as an extreme event that could overwhelm us, and I read about this about 3 years ago, I found that ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But now there are more and more people. Stephen Hawking says humans were limited by slow biological evolution, couldn't compete and would be superseded. Bill Gates says, I'm a camp that is concerned about superintelligence. And Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, says computers are going to take over from humans, no question. But will we be gods? Or will we be like the family pets? Or will we be like ants that get stepped on? I really don't know. My opinion on artificial intelligence is slightly more positive. I believe that humans would become nodes in a global network of intelligences and a huge ecosystem of ideas. These ideas will just run on different kinds of architectures, and you will be one of them. Let's face it. Now, for sure we will have very powerful tools, and they may be around already. And what's concerning is much more than what all these people have been saying. Powerful tools will be most likely misused. Anything that can happen will happen. That's Murphy's law. We know this. And in fact, cybercrime is exploding. It's costing us $3 trillion every year right now. How much will it cost us in 5 years' time or 10 years' time? This is really a threat to digital society and the economy and all the infrastructure that's run on top of this. And in fact, some people say there are two kinds of companies, those that have been hacked and those who don't yet know. And in fact, even the military, the Pentagon, the White House have been hacked. Nobody is safe from hacking. How would superintelligent machines be used? Well, most likely to create a cybernetic society. And how to do this? Well, cybernetics is about controlling systems, right? And how do you control systems? Well, knowledge is power. So if you had all the knowledge of the world, would you be almighty in perspective? How would it work in practice? How to control people's decisions? Well, you could try to manipulate their choices by personalized information. And actually, if you use the web today, you get personalized recommendations and information all the time. So the question that we must really ask is, are we already remotely controlled? Well, certainly, all those companies that engage into personalized advertisements are trying to do this. They're doing it since a long time. Yeah? They're trying to manipulate our choices to make us buy goods that we would otherwise not buy. Well, if this is about one washing powder versus another washing powder, or about this pair of shoes or that pair of shoes, we don't need to be concerned. But politics got interested in this too, and this is called nudging. So the very same principles, using all this personalized information about you, 3,000, 5,000 quantifiers about your life, including your sexual preferences, your diseases, and all this kind of things that secretly collected about you, will be used to manipulate you. It's called liberal paternalism, but some people say, it's neither liberal nor is it really caring of your interests. It might be caring about somebody else's interests. In fact, the idea of a cybernetic society is pretty old. In Chile, it was already implemented, and it looked very promising, but in the end, this government was thrown over. But the very same this is happening elsewhere. I've heard that with every search request that you make, 200 experiments are started. So this triggers off a whole cascade of activities to find out about you and all sorts of things. And effectively, go back to this article I showed you before, it talks not only about a crystal ball, but about a big mechanism, like a global clockwork. It could be perfectly controlled, and the Spiegel finally also understood what's going on. Now, why we need to be concerned is because this creates dangers for democracy. Quite a few dangers, actually, and the question is, should we care? Now, is democracy maybe outdated, as some people suggest, or is it still the best system to just further improve it with digital technologies? Well, there's a reason why we should be concerned. Because if we influence people and their decision making as nudging does, we know that social influence undermines the wisdom of crowds. And that's actually the basic principle behind democracies. And not only this, also behind the functioning of financial markets. For example, yes?
I think that's a very fundamental point. What is social influence? What is the social influence?
This is the fact that people change their mind by social interaction with other people, even if they just learn about other people's opinions, that might change their opinions. And that can reduce the performance of finding the best solution.
By reducing diversity.
By reducing diversity, by creating a herding effect or a tunnel view, you could say. And in fact, Andy Pariser wrote a book that phrases it a little bit differently. He calls it a filter bubble. He said we're basically living in a world that's just being created around us to fit our taste, and we don't see anymore the real world. And in fact, all these personal data that are collected about us, they're not just collected in order to find terrorism and child abuse. This is really about you. They want to understand how you think, how you feel, what you will be doing, and how you can be manipulated to do certain kind of things. It also becomes more and more important in politics, because not only can Google or other companies guess pretty well what you're going to vote for the political party, so the secret vote is gone, but also these tools are being used to manipulate your vote. Facebook can influence your vote. Google can influence your vote. And this is how people win elections these days. So it's not anymore the competition of the best ideas for the votes of the people. It's the competition of the more successful manipulation. Unfortunately, this could actually undermine democracy. And maybe you say, okay, what's so bad about it as long as it doesn't hurt? But maybe, what will governments in future do if manipulation doesn't work and do something that doesn't comply with the prediction that has been made with the plans that have been made for the future? If you're disturbing the plan, would you be punished? And that's on the way too. China is now engaging into rating every single citizen on a one-dimensional scale. Whatever you buy, how soon you pay, what you click in the internet, your political opinion, all wrong way, they wouldn't get certain kinds of jobs. Period. You know, you may not be able to become a doctor, even though that has nothing to do with politics. But maybe this is just a punishment for you not thinking the right way. Well, why is this concerning? Because it is probably not creating really a better society, a perfect clockwork, a most efficient system. Because we know that similar systems have failed at airports, for example. You know, they have also a score system. If you moan, if you laugh, if you whisper to somebody, if you comb your hair, you get negative points. It could be a terrorist, and now you would be questioned. So you get a special screening. Yeah, that's just a fact. And those experts who are using the system just say, no, it doesn't work. But it's there. It's there, and it might be the basis of predictive policing. Not only would police be in the places where crime might happen, where somebody is committing a burglary or something like this, they might also put people in prison that might, perhaps, with a certain probability, do something bad. And if you read the newspaper carefully today, then it turns out this is already happening too, in Switzerland.
This is not new. This happened for the centuries. Always has been like this.
Well, does it make things better? No. It concerns me. Yeah.
Could you repeat what is happening?
There are people put in prison even though they didn't commit a crime yet. People, you know, who are on a watch list and who some people think they might do something bad in the future. Now, what's concerning is that mistakes will always happen, no matter how smart a superintelligence would be. Yeah, and so that's why we should be concerned that many people are not talking about this China model. Now, China as the better way of organizing a society. And this kind of discussion is happening in Europe too. You know, the idea is that social order is created by a very powerful government that imposes this order, otherwise it would behave like wild beasts, you know. Homo hominis lupus is kind of the original quote. Okay, so the idea is there's an all-powerful this vice king or benevolent dictator. The question is, wouldn't that be great if you could just take decisions, you know, to put a shopping center here and a city over there, and whatever we need, a freeway or an airport, you know, we can just make it happen. But it turns out, this model also has its limits. In effect, there are empty malls, so-called ghost malls, there are empty cities, ghost cities, and it happens that smog now is such a big issue that some cities are almost not functional anymore. So that's also not the solution. And besides, how well could the superintelligence theoretically work, you know, if it was just as perfect as it can be? Well, in fact, you would think maybe very well, because people's behavior is astonishingly predictable. There are companies like Recorded Future that predict your behavior with more than 90% accuracy. Because we have these weekly and daily schedules, you know, which is repetitive, and so that makes us predictive. But certainly, a digital mirror agent that's kind of a copy of ourselves in the digital world could not be more similar to us than a twin, an identical twin. And as we now know, two identical twins are really fully identical, right? And even if they were, and if he knew everything about those two people, interaction can change everything. And we know that very well. You know. One day we fall in love with somebody, and that's going to change our entire life. And if that person is very influential, you know, that could change the course of history too.
But isn't that a counter-argument? We are saying you could fall in love, and that would change your life. But actually what we're saying is today we cannot predict when you will fall in love, and we do not record that fact. So the system cannot actually respond to that, but in the future, when my mobile phone will track all this data.
Okay, you may just follow what OkCupid tells you to do, and then it might be predictable, you know, with who you fall in love. But in fact, we have similar systems in cars, for example, which have a lot of assistance systems, and each of these assistance systems are separately tested until they're perfect, you know. They make no errors whatsoever. And then you put these different assistants into one car, and they start influencing each other, and your car does all sorts of unpredictable things. You know, this is just the effect of complex systems. It's very well known. In fact, here is an experiment that we did in the lab about decisions of people, and it turned out that our model was able to predict individual predictions with 96% accuracy. Now, that's unheard of. But still, it could not really reproduce what we found in the experiment. So the model couldn't predict the macroscopic, the systemic outcome. And why is this? Because this is again an unstable system that we studied, and a small change, a random perturbation, could change the outcome from this to this. A totally different outcome.
Could you intervene? I think we're getting a little bit away from the point you were making before that computers can replace humans. And we are talking about interactions now and how the world evolves. And I really have issues understanding how a computer can rebuild all this chain of interactions and become as intelligent as a human.
Now, this is not the point that I'm trying to study over here. What I'm saying here is no matter how much data you have, no matter how smart the system is, it would never be able to predict the future and control the future completely. And in particular, because the world is complex. And there's even this effect that now we add noise to our highly predictive micromodel, so it makes our prediction of individual behavior much worse. But it turns out that it improves the systemic prediction a lot. So we don't need to know so much about each single individual in order to make a reasonable prediction of what people do. Yes.
Is it not necessary just to predict where the fixed points are in the dynamical system?
Oh yeah, we're trying to find all the fixed points of our world, and we'll buy you a bottle of champagne.
Sorry, did I get that? You're saying we do not need big data. Because we
I'm
don't need so
saying-
much evidence.
Yes.
We have already a little evidence that is sufficient. We do not need all this
We
massive
just need smart data, you know. And I will come into this, you know, so just be a little bit patient with me. So what I'm trying to say is there are two kinds of situations, stable ones and unstable ones. The stable situations, you don't worry about them, because sometimes people make mistakes, but these mistakes will not mess up your system. Your system will recover, everything will be fine. You know? And then there is another kind of situation, which is the bad weather. Turbulent, unpredictable, and unfortunately in this kind of situation small details can matter, and most likely you would not know these details, so that would make your system change in unpredictable ways. And we know that very well from weather forecasting, which is limited in its predictability because Now we don't have enough data. It's the physics behind this phenomenon, and it's the physics of turbulence. We understand turbulence well enough to know that a slight change may change everything. Now, that's called butterfly effect. Just a matter of time, but it would produce a big change, and 100 times, a million times, or a billion or a trillion times more data would not allow you to make perfect predictions. So that means we need to get better again, and we're getting towards decision making based on explanatory models. So how then should we use computer simulation if not for prediction? We should focus on understanding complex dynamical systems, because this understanding will allow us to understand states of the system that haven't occurred before. You cannot extrapolate this with big data. Big data just sees what has happened. And if there is a new state of society, as the digital society will be a different world, your extrapolation of big data will not tell you how this looks like. In fact, it's known that sometimes less is more. Simple models with little data can be more powerful than big data. I'm giving you an example over here. Google Trend has been celebrated as the prime example of a success story of big data analytics. Unfortunately, recently people found out it doesn't work that well. Looking at how it says if I have a headache, how many people say I don't feel well, I need medicine, or whatever, is not as predictive as you would think. Also because Google is changing their algorithms all the time. Also because there are all these advertisements that would make people think certain things. So what have we been doing? We have combined actually two small data sets with a model. If you look into epidemic spreading and use the World Health Organization's infection data, display them as a function of space and time, how the epidemic spreads, it would look very chaotic, really disappointing. You can't see the logic over there. However, if you combine this data with air travel data, the number of people traveling from A to B, from B to C, and so on, we can define an effective distance. So two cities like Frankfurt and New York City that have a large geographic distance, but a huge passenger flow would be close together in this effective distance. Then what you see is a circular spreading pattern. And suddenly everything makes sense. Now with this method it becomes possible to identify the origin location of your disease, which is often unknown at the beginning. And once you have determined the origin location based on the circularity of the pattern, you can also predict the further spreading because of this circular spreading pattern. So now you can say, okay, these will be the next cities hit by this flu, and that will be the second next, and so on. You can prepare if you have limited medicine or immunization doses or doctors, you know where to place them. Okay, and we also now have models for pedestrian flows and car disasters, for traffic congestion, models that allow us to understand booms and recessions, vulnerability of power grids, to suffer from blackouts, resilience of gas supply, the models for coordination, for cooperation when it breaks down, for crime and its spreading. There are also models for the evolution of moral behavior, for social preferences, the emergence of social norms, the occurrence of conflict. So we've learned a lot about our society and economy and all sorts of systems thanks to the availability of some data. Data is important, but there's not the end of theory. Theory stays very important to understand the world, and so the idea was to build this living Earth simulator, but not by spying into everyone's private life, but by combining all these models that can be fed by some data, aggregated data. And so we would build something like a probabilistic weather forecast, knowing that it won't be perfect, but it would help us a little bit to take better decisions and to check out different kinds of scenarios. I'm not saying, though, we should use this to manipulate people's choices, and you will understand later why this is the case. So, understanding the world needs less data than one would think, but more collaboration, multiple perspectives, because finding models for complex systems is difficult. There's no automated routine that does it for us. So we need to integrate knowledge across domains. Natural sciences, engineering sciences, social sciences need to come together, and we need to bring the brightest minds, the best ideas all over the world together to build this. We need to collaborate, and that's actually what Future ICT was setting up, an interdisciplinary collaboration in many countries of the world and between a lot of countries. And in fact, Future ICT idea was really successful because a lot of activities have started, public activities and some activities that most people don't know about. So to keep up with the pace at which the world is changing, we need a large-scale and participatory approach, and that's also why crowd-based approaches are on the rise. Now everyone talks about crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, wisdom of crowds versus swarm intelligence, citizen science, crowd security, and so on. So this is just more powerful than what we had in the past. We just need to learn how to do it. So we need to learn how to bring the best ideas of many minds together, how to create collective intelligence with the right kind of supportive information platforms. And the interesting thing is, if you look into the Netflix prize, now this was about €1 million, and it took 2 years to win this prize. It turned out that no single team could win it. The way they won was when the best team was averaging over their best solution and other solutions that apparently were not as good as their solution. So diversity is not the best team. We need to have many teams, first of all, diversity, plurality, and then put this information together in good ways. And in fact, the same applies to our economy, because it can be shown that the most successful and most developed economies are the most complex and diverse ones. So getting rid of diversity is not a solution. On the contrary, too much standardization is just bad for our economy and for our society too. It's diversity that drives innovation. It's diversity that makes our society more resilient, that creates a more collective intelligence, many other important things. So we need to learn how to live with diversity and how to use it to our advantage. So when I came to ETH, I thought I would spend the rest of my life on modeling societal problems better and better, until my retirement. And then 2 years ago, I suddenly reduced my efforts to model this world. Why is this, you would want to know? Well, I came to the conclusion that the world would be very different in 2 or 3 decades. We're on this path A, I would think. Unfortunately, it still looks okay, but most likely we're running into much more trouble than we even have today. We need to get on path B, so we need to have at least an alternative plan, a plan B, And we need to think now about the organizational principles of our future world, because it will work according to different rules. And that brings us to governance 4.0, to mechanism and systems design. Yes, we need to learn how to use the forces that drive our society and our economy. We need to learn to use it to our advantage, as in Asian martial arts, where you use the forces created by the opponent. In fact, we can learn to let these social economic systems work for us in the very same way as we've learned to use the forces of nature for us. We've created motors to transform explosion that would otherwise be disrupted into directed motion. And many other inventions that we make. The same thing can be done with the way our society works. And some people call it social engineering. I don't like this term at all. But mechanism design is very powerful. On the other hand, it's very difficult too, so maybe there are less than 5 people who really understand how to do this in the world. The issue is the right mechanism and rules aren't necessarily those that stakeholders would ask for, but those that work finally and create the desired outcomes. And sometimes systems, in particular complex systems, work differently. And you think we've seen that for crowd disasters, for traffic jams, and so on. And in particular, when you talk about governments, then power requires trust. Of course, power results from public support. Public support results from trust, and trust results from transparency. And that's why I think surveillance is not only bad for private people, and as we've learned in connection with the BND affair, for companies too, it's actually also bad for governments on the long run, because people would lose their trust and governments would lose their power. And this is not what we want to happen. Now, there's nothing wrong about big data, artificial intelligence, or cybernetics, apart from the way we use these methods. They can be used in different ways. And I think the way they're being used is at times pretty concerning. And maybe we should use them in a different way. Because the world's biggest problems are not solved by prediction and control. They need better mechanism and system designs. And here is a new approach, which is consistent with individual autonomy, free markets, and democracy, which is distributed data and control to enable self-realization. And in fact, I'm talking about smart data here. This is what the CERN does, which is actually the biggest big data civil infrastructure that exists. They delete 99% of their measurement data right away. And the data they keep in a smart way, depending on what they want to find. So depending on the experiment they're performing, they have a hypothesis of what they would see. And they want to verify or falsify it. And for this, they just make certain kind of data, and others are just useless for this experiment. So the point is, we should learn to do tailored measurements, as we've always done it in science, and not just collect all the data that we can get, and then fish in this huge ocean of big data, and hopefully, we'll find some fish that we're looking for. How would we build this smart data infrastructure? This is what I call the planetary nervous system. And I think this should be built as a citizen web for the following reason. We're now entering the age of the Internet of Things. So measurement sensors will be distributed all around us, not only in coffee machines and fridges, but also in shoes, clothes, and in this room and everywhere. So in about 10 years, there will be 100 billion sensors around us. Now, assume a single company or a single government would have all of this data under control. well, maybe this government is just perfect, but what about the next one, the second next one, the third next, you know? I mean, a powerful data set, a powerful information infrastructure would attract terrorists, extremists, organized crime, as I told you before. No such information infrastructure is absolutely secure. So, it's better, I believe, if we control it in a distributed way. We give that in the hands of the citizens would buy the sensors, would place them in their houses, gardens, and working places themselves, and decide what kind of data they want to share with whom, for what purpose, and so on. So we can feel comfortable about this. It would be all our system. We could all be proud of building this together, as we have built so many other things, like roads and universities and schools and all the fantastic things that we are proud of. And then actually we can do this. All it takes is you and your smartphone, because we can connect these smartphones together to build a global measurement system. In each smartphone there are about 15 sensors, for luminosity, for noise, for location, for acceleration, you name it. It's a universal measurement device. And what can we do with it? Well, for example, we can use acceleration data to measure earthquakes and warn our friends and family and colleagues. So if one smartphone is shaking, it just could mean that you're mountain biking. But if all our smartphones are shaking at the same time, that's bad news, really, So this would be an earthquake. And our smartphones would talk to each other, and they would figure out that's an earthquake and warn our friends, So that's powerful. But we need a system we can trust. And we have started to build such a system, which we call NervousNet. And in NervousNet, you can control the information flows. You can decide which of those sensors you want to use, to open up for your own use, that means to produce data just for yourself, or which of these sensors you want to use to share data with others. You're in control. And on the long run, we also want to establish a personal data store. The idea is that everyone would have a data mailbox with personal data. Whoever produces data about you, intentionally or accidentally, would have to send this data into your data mailbox. It would be structured into different kinds of data, shopping data, social data, health data, whatever. And then you can control your mailbox, your data mailbox, and say, okay, I'm going to share my business data with, my shopping data with businesses because I want to get personalized offers. Products that fit my person, my interest, my personality. They would say, but my social data, well, maybe I'm just sharing this with my friends, and my health data I'm just sharing with my doctor, or my health insurance, whatever, you decide with whom you share, for what person, for how long, and so on. That would be the idea. So you would get back this informational self-determination that we should have according to law. And together you would create a participatory information system, an open data source, data commons, we could say, like Wikipedia, just for real-time streaming data. And the success principle would be to share. That means you can take data that you need, for example, to do some consultancy or come up with some service or whatever, and you should give some data back, obviously, otherwise the system can't work. And in the same way, we would share source codes, because to generate these data, we have to use the measurement sensors in particular ways. You know, our team cannot do all these inventions. You know, we can do 10 or 20 or 100 of these inventions, but if everyone can use these computer codes that we have produced, modify them to adapt them to their own uses, share it back, other people can take it, modify it, share it back, and so on. Then suddenly, within a short time, we can have thousands, tens of thousands, millions of different ways of using these measurement sensors. You know? So the principle is to create new opportunities for everyone. And if this is set up well and enabling users, customers, citizens with data, will lead to better services, better products, better businesses, better neighborhoods, smarter cities and smarter societies. And in fact, we end up with an information, innovation and production ecosystem where we have co-competition, co-learning, co-innovation, co-creation. So we take, modify, and give it back. And this way we can produce exponential innovation and all the jobs that we need. Today, most of the time we have linear innovation, you know. A new car model every 2 years, you know. This is linear, but this is a catalytic effect that can create exponential growth, and you will need this to fill the job gap.
Sorry, isn't it already the web? You're talking about motion.
Well,
the web, it could be the web.
What we have today is the millions of apps that you can download on your smartphone, but these apps can't talk to each other. You know, they're walled gardens. They're separated worlds in a sense. And this is what we want to change. So our app is actually a platform in which you can grow your own apps. You know, and we hope that these apps will talk to each other. So that would be much more powerful. You know, you can use this data stream to open up your own company, to put a game on top, whatever comes to mind. So all of this can be done. And so the new, yes.
I don't get a relation from smart data to this mass collection of data.
Smart data is you don't keep all the data that you can get. So what I'm talking about next is self-organizational systems. And what's important there is that you have real-time data for real-time feedback. Once we've used the data for the feedback, you can throw them away. You don't have to keep all these data forever. You know? And that's kind of the third principle. It throws away most of the data. We would do this too. You know? We're not interested to spy on you. I personally think we don't need this, and that we need to have decentralized creativity and innovation and platforms that help people to coordinate each other, digital assistants that would support us in creating social order. And in fact, you know, it would work like swarm intelligence. If you watch a swarm of birds, flock of birds, this is really amazing. Now, how does it work? Well, it's just a matter of simple feedback loops. And then complex dynamical system self-organizes like magic. It can produce the pattern you want to have, it can produce the properties you want to have, it can produce the functionality you want to have. But this is the art. You need to know complexity science. So what I'm saying is that 300 years after its invention, we can make the invisible hand work using the Internet of Things to run self-organizing systems. Yeah, so now we can have all these measurement sensors everywhere where we need it. And this can be used to overcome congestion. I'm not going to run the whole video, but you can find it online. So what you would see is that in the beginning we have stop-and-go traffic, as we've seen it before. But then we turn on a self-driving mode, a driver assistance system, adaptive cruise control. And that would not only increase the comfort of driving, but it would also stabilize the traffic flow and increase the capacity of the flow. not enough time today, but anyway, you can believe me. And we've done that actually 10 years ago, long before Google was talking about self-driving cars, and we've also tested this with Volkswagen, right? Besides this, we've worked on smarter cities, how to improve traffic light control, and the main change is that we're going away from imposing what we saw to be an optimal control scheme for the entire city by a traffic control center towards bottom-up self-organization, where we have local feedbacks and the traffic flows will control the traffic lights. And it turns out that actually that produces really enormous improvement for public transport, also improvements for individual traffic and for pedestrian cyclists and for the environment too. So the question is, can we build a system not only for technological systems, but also for our economy and our society? Can we build a system for cooperation? And my claim is, yes, this can be done, and it's better than nudging, just we need to measure externalities and the external effects of what we do in many dimensions, and then we can make the invisible hand work. And in order for it to work, we need to have multidimensional incentives and value exchange system. I call this multi-dimensional finance, something that UBS and Credit Suisse should be interested in. They need new ideas. We should really build this as soon as possible together. And besides this multidimensional finance system, we can use reputation systems because they're known to help support quality and interaction. And there are other mechanisms too, such as merit-based matching. Interestingly, this is not only stabilizing cooperation, it's also increasing the overall level of cooperation. And besides this, we can create more sophisticated functionality with digital assistants that would help us to create more awareness for the situation we're in, to support us in detecting promising interactions, supporting us in interactions with others. And just imagine a multicultural context. This is a problem in Europe and many other areas of the world, that the diversity has become so large that we just can't understand all these cultures and how to deal with them. And so that creates problems. However, now we have real-time translation. And we speak into one phone, say this German, and now it comes Chinese or Spanish or Italian, whatever, and that happens by these digital assistants. We can do the same thing for multicultural interaction because every culture is full of success principles. Most of these success principles have never been written up in words or in mathematical formulas. If we would do this, we could start combining these success principles in new ways that would create so much new value. This is where new value will be created, and digital assistants will help us. Also help us to protect us from exploitation, will help us to organize value transfer and all this. So summarizing, these are the core principles for the economy 4.0 and the smart and full society. We need a planning nervous system. We need to consider externalities. We need to have a multidimensional finance system, digital systems, and collective intelligence. And interestingly enough, all of this can be based on distributed control and distributed approaches, which are also more secure. I talked about data security before. And I personally believe the countries implementing these new organizational principles first will be leading in the world. So finally, everything comes together. Science, politics, business, society, it's amazing. Now we can build with the self-organizing system using the natural forces behind the working of our society and economy. Can build massively increased efficiency, can build self-organizing, self-improving systems. This would all be based on the democratic principle of participation, on individual autonomy of decision-making. It wouldn't be controlled by monstrous information infrastructure. It would be creative, innovative in all this. It would be free entrepreneurial activities and markets. But as compared to what we have today, we consider much more the externalities of all our decisions and actions. And that would make our world more other regarding and fair and improve also our environment. It would support cooperation and reduce conflict. So, isn't that just what we've been dreaming of all the time? No? Let's do this together. Thank you very much.